When I was younger, my mother was always convinced that I had some kind of clairvoyance from the spirit world. At rare opportunities when I was younger, I would hold conversations with invisible people or was able to predict with clarity some happenings. I personally believe that some of these things may have been actual contact with the spirit world. It was mostly just lucky guesses based on a very observational child. One of my first memories of my interaction with the paranormal world occurred when I was around the age of 5. However, this story requires some background before it can be fully understood. In my old neighborhood, we had an elderly neighbor who spoiled me with beautiful glass dolls and rag dolls that she had apparently kept around the house. She had a granddaughter who lived with her because her mother had unfortunately died of a drug overdose, and she was very ill herself. To make her happy, the grandma would buy her granddaughter tons of dolls. Unfortunately, the girl died years before my family would ever meet the old woman. At first, I loved these dolls because with these dolls came an imaginary playmate. I never recalled having another imaginary friend besides this girl. Her name was Abby, but she wanted to be called Amy instead. We went with that name, and she followed me right up until we moved into our new house. I was starting to get old by then, but I still enjoyed having the company of Amy. I was extremely shy when I was younger, and it was hard for me to make friends. Only months following our move into the new house, I remember becoming deathly scared of the dolls, and all of my memories of Amy ceased and were replaced by the attic monster. I would have terribly vivid nightmares that haunt me to this day of what was lurking behind the ceiling door, and I'd often wake up screaming. It also led to repeated incidents of bedwetting. I believe I've suppressed these memories because they were so frightening to me as a child. It even led to my mom taking me to therapy where I underwent hypnosis to see what the underlying cause of my fear was. My mom relayed this account back to me, but I only repeat it now because of how serious she was, and of the 3 times I've heard it in my life, it has always been the same. My fear of dolls coincided with my fear of a monster in the attic. I remember believing Amy lived in the attic, and my parents recall every time they went up to fix the insulation, I would ask them to tell Amy hi. I had grown scared of a girl who was angry about the change of houses because she had liked the other one but wouldn't leave her dolls with anyone, even me, naturally. The therapist told my parents I was just scared of the change of houses, and I associated the dolls with the change because I had relayed them to the old house, or some such nonsense like that. Either way, the dolls were taken to the basement to be locked in storage for another few years. When I was 7, the old lady who had given me the dolls died and we attended her funeral. My mom suggested we bring the dolls with us to give back to her surviving family. So we did, and they accepted the load with smiles and words of thanks for coming to the funeral. I was keeping my distance and was looking at the brochure. It had the woman's picture on the front with her name like any other funeral card. However, on the inside was a mini epitaph dedicated to her love in life. And though I leave you, I will be greeted by my little angel, my darling Abby, called Amy. The bedwetting and night terror subsided when the dolls left our house, and I can only assume that Amy might be happier with the rest of her family. I sincerely hope that she has found her way up to rest with her grandma, and though I still have an extreme fear of dolls, I think I have grown up enough to understand what it really all meant. It was some time during the summer. My mom and I were moving out of her boyfriend's basement apartment into this house he had just bought for us to rent. The people who lived in the house before us works at a local television station here. Before we moved in, the guy from the television station, we'll call him Dave, told us there is an old man in the basement. Now, me and my mom weren't believers in the paranormal, so we scoffed at the idea of someone deceased living in the basement. This is the layout of the house. You walk through a front door and you have a little porch. Off the porch there is a hallway. To the left, there is a front room. On the same side, but down the hall a little more, there is another door leading into the dining room. On your right side there is the stairs leading upstairs. And a little more ways down the hall, there's the first door leading into the kitchen. When you come into the house and you go into the front room, there are 2 French doors leading into the dining room, and off the dining room there are 2 more French doors leading into the new living room. Off the living room there is a back door leading into the driveway and to the shed. When you walk into the house and go into the hallway to the first door leading into the kitchen, right behind the kitchen door is the basement door. Leading into the basement, directly off the kitchen is a computer or workroom. Off the living room there is another door, which leads into the kitchen. When you are walking into the house and going up the stairs, the first thing you see is the linen closet, followed by my mom's room to the left of the closet and a spare room. To the right of the closet there is my room and the bathroom. Now, back to the story. It was a few months after we moved in. Things started happening, and it wasn't big stuff, so we always brushed it off, until one night, my nephew, who was only 7 at the time, came over for a sleepover. We were in the living room, watching a movie when the 2 French doors leading into the dining room swung open. Now, when you close these doors, they close tightly, so you would need a good amount of force to have them swing open on their own. We got a little spooked, so I got up to close the doors, then I went back to sit down, and on my way back to the couch, the door leading to the driveway swung open. Now I was getting scared, so I told my nephew to go upstairs with my mom, who was in bed watching TV. So he went upstairs and we all went to sleep. The next morning, my nephew and I were in the basement looking for the hose to clean the car when I felt a slight tugging on my arm. I asked him to stop tugging on me because I had to find the hose, and he said, "Auntie, I'm not tugging on you." When I turned around, he was on the other side of the basement playing with his Ninja Turtle figures. After the tugging happened, I got a feeling as if someone was watching me or was standing behind me. I turned around and no one was there, and my nephew was still sitting in the same place, playing with his toys. So I went back to looking for the hose when my nephew started screaming, so I ran over to him and asked him what was wrong. He said the man just showed him his cut. I looked at my nephew and kept asking him what man and what cut. All he kept saying was that the man was standing over there by the washing machine and he was cleaning his cut. Later on that day, me and my nephew were once again in the basement. He left his toys there after the incident that happened earlier that day. He didn't want to go down there by himself, so I mustered up the courage to go down with him. We were halfway down the stairs when my nephew turned to me and went, "Shh, Auntie, the man is sleeping. I don't want to wake him." Now, again, I didn't see anything, so I took my nephew by the hand and brought him upstairs and asked him to explain what this man looked like. He said the man was chocolate, and he had cuts and raggedy clothing. He also said the man was harmless and alone. Now, I didn't believe him, because I thought he was making this up, but when I told my mom, she said she believed him because she has been hearing someone calling her name, yet no one was in the house or around. After supper, my mom, nephew, and I went to the basement to get some ice cream to go with our pie that my mom had bought earlier. As we were down there, my mom said that she felt like someone was touching her, yet no one was near her. My nephew kept telling us that the man was mad that we were disturbing him, and he didn't like us being there. My mom and me looked at each other and then looked at my nephew. When we looked down at my nephew, you could see that something or someone had made handprints on his shoulders, as if standing behind him with their hands on his shoulders. But there was only the three of us in the basement, and neither one of us was near him. The next day, we contacted the owners before Dave and asked them about the man in the basement. They told us that when they lived there, their son would go into the basement and spend hours playing with a man. We tried doing some research on the house, but we came up empty-handed. After our experiences in that house, we both became believers of the paranormal. After reading many different stories on this particular website, I decided that I could possibly get some help from some of the readers here. This mainly happened when I was a child, basically about 10 years ago. However, it hasn't left. When I was around 6 years of age, I moved to Alberta from Baja, California. Being that we didn't have a house, we lived in my grandparents' old place in one of the elderly parts of town. As I was a new child in a huge place, and my school didn't start for a good 3 months, I didn't have many friends. Yet, I seemed to have found one. After about a week of living in my grandparents' house, my mother noticed I was spending more time in my room downstairs than with other people. She told me later that she'd always find me in my room, talking to thin air. Often I'd draw, as I was and still am artistic, but I would come back with these drawings of large black circles. When questioned, I'd say without skipping a beat, she drew them. After a while, as any parent would, my mother became worried. I'd spend more and more time in my room talking to my friend, whom I affectionately referred to as she. My mother finally snapped after I'd come upstairs asking for an extra cookie because she was still hungry. I remember that she got very angry, yelling at me that she wasn't real and I needed to grow up and become an adult instead of wasting my time with something that didn't exist. The last thing I remember from that day was running down to my room in the basement in tears. I wasn't told the rest of this story until just recently, within the last year or two. Apparently, about an hour after my mother had snapped at me, she had come downstairs to apologize. After all, I was only a child, and in a brand new town. Naturally, I would make an imaginary friend. As she got close to my room, she said that she could hear a voice speaking, slightly higher than my own. She didn't catch most of the words, and told me she'd heard, "okay," and "I'll be here." For the most part, thinking it was just me talking to she again, she barged in, only to find me fast asleep. I, myself, don't actually remember any of this. I only remember running into my room and going straight to bed. My mother said that she'd seen a shadow hovering above me, looking barely human, but it appeared to be whispering in my ear. Almost as soon as she'd seen it, it vanished from sight. After that, my mother grabbed me and ran. In the next few weeks afterwards, I began complaining that she was angry and refused to play with me, saying that she said she still likes me, but she says that mommy and daddy are mean. Shortly thereafter, we moved out of the house. Now, nearly 10 years later, I still visit that house. Nothing usually ever happens, but a recent occurrence brought me to post this story. Roughly a week ago, I went to my grandparents' house again for a visit. My brother and I were trying to scare each other, and jokingly, I said I'd go back into my old room. When I walked into my room, something was on my bed that scared me half to death. Lying on the pillow were the old pictures I had drawn with she, including ones that were nothing more than a large black circle. Normally, I wouldn't have been scared. However, my mother had burned all my old pictures that I had drawn. These were perfect, with not even a crumple. Obviously freaked out, I ran. I believe that she is still there, but I don't know exactly what it is. That's why I'm here. Asking any suggestions or theories would be extremely helpful. My grandma has been telling me that recently she's felt as though she was being watched and that someone had pushed her over the other day. I mostly just want to know what this thing is or was.